All right, and what is your name, sir, in the jail?
Jacob Bunt, Your Honor.
Okay, so good morning, Mr. Bunt. That is file 5281 of 2021, and Mr. Graff is here on behalf of Mr. Bunt. Mr. Graff, have you reviewed the report and recommendation with your client? What does he wish to do?
Good morning. Yes, I have, Your Honor. We reviewed the allegation and the recommendations. It's my understanding Mr. Bunt would be waiving hearing and admitting responsibility to the failure on probation. I do have information I did submit to the court before I take the allocution to make sure Your Honor should.
Well, I reviewed, I know I saw where he's obtained his high school equivalency diploma. I received a letter from his mother and sister and father and also indication that he has been engaged with community mental health and the peer almost from the time of this sentence in this court.
We also provided a screenshot from Mott Community College indicating that he enrolled.
Yeah, I couldn't quite interpret what that was about, but he's enrolled in college now, and
That's correct.
all right.
And then if I may approach, Your Honor, I guess we may need to have ourselves addressing this, but I do have a receipt from May 16. It looks as though he's paid off the fines and costs.
Right, Mr. Bunt, were you able to hear what was going on? TV cut out at some point.
I was not for the past minute and a half now, or a minute.
Okay, so essentially, Mr. Graff and I discussed the various documents that he submitted, including your enrollment at Mott Community College, your high school equivalency diploma, letters from family members, as well as a letter from Lapeer County Community Mental Health indicating that you've been involved in going to meetings and compliant since May of 2021, and also a receipt showing that you paid all your fines and costs in the matter. Okay.
Hey, Your Honor.
All right. So Mr. Bunt, Mr. Graff indicated that you wanted to admit responsibility for these violations. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor. I would like to say something when ready.
Oh, okay. You will get a chance to say whatever you want to me before we're done. But right now, I just need to deal with the plea. So, sure. Is it true? Well, you do understand you have a right to a hearing today at which Mr. Graff would represent you to contest the allegations, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And it's your decision to waive that hearing, correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
And you understand the worst that could happen is you could be sentenced to up to 1 year in jail on the use of methamphetamine and up to 6 months in jail, no, 1 year in jail on the attempt joyriding, and up to 1 year in jail on the OWI second offense. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and even though it's 3 sentences, your maximum exposure is really up to 1 year in jail. Do you understand?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, and no one's used any force or threats to get you to change your plea to these violations, correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
All right, then. So you were placed on probation September 16th of 2021 for the offenses I just named. And as a condition of that probation, you were to complete your paperwork appointment with your probation officer and contact your probation officer on a regular basis and complete a number of terms of probation, including alcohol, highway safety, victim impact panel, dual disorders programming or MRT, a substance abuse program, let's see, a benchmark PBT, and take PBTs 4 times per month, correct?
Your Honor.
And you did not do any of those things, correct?
Correct, Your Honor.
All right. Then to the violation, how do you plead?
I plead guilty, Your Honor.
All right, I'll accept your plea, find it's voluntary, accurate, and understanding. So, Mr. Graff, what else would you like me to know about Mr. Bunn?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll try not to rehash any of the information before you, but you know, I would agree with Ms. Helmer when you take a first blush at this. Obviously, he failed miserably at probation. He didn't even appear for the first meeting, and as far as the court was aware, up until provision of this documentation, the court didn't think he had accomplished anything. But I think it's a completely different situation as Mr. Bunt has provided this information on where he is now as opposed to where he was when this all happened. It's unfortunate it's come to this, but I think it paints a completely different picture. When the court came into the hearing with the original recommendations, it was we had somebody who didn't show up in the first meeting and accomplished absolutely nothing. But now we have somebody that a couple years later, although he didn't comply with probation, in the real world, he did accomplish a lot of things. As the court will note, he's got his GED, he's got a job. He's been employed there for quite a while. I think he enjoys the job. He's been involved in mental health counseling, which I think is very important for him. He's enrolled himself in Mott Community College after obtaining his GED. These are all things he probably wouldn't have accomplished if he was still in the thrust of addiction. And I think the letters that have been submitted from family members that see him on a regular basis, and his father's here today to support him, to show that although they've seen him throughout this period of time, they had no indication that he was using. And so although the court, as in the last gentleman who's up for a probation violation, doesn't have any documentation showing the person wasn't using, and that gentleman too had made some accomplishments. I think Mr. Bunt, he's got family members that can speak to his sobriety, and I don't think he would have come this far without that. Mr. Bunt comes back for this court. There are no new charges, as far as I'm aware, that resulted in him taking care of this. In fact, he reached out and wanted to try to take care of the warrant. Somehow it was scheduled for a Zoom hearing as opposed to making him turn himself in. He took the news pretty hard when he found out that he had to turn himself in. But despite all of that, realizing the progress that he'd made, he didn't relapse, he didn't run, even though he knew it jeopardized all the accomplishments he'd had over the last year, 2 years. And he turned himself in from Lapeer. Family went down and made arrangements to get him here. And he sits before this court. I think that if we look at Mr. Bunt on what he's accomplished as opposed to the, I guess you could say, failures on probation, this has been somewhat of a success story. Obviously, the goal of probation is not only so you can comply with court orders, but also to better yourself and be in a better position than before you entered the programming. Now, we don't have the programming in place through the courts, but Mr. Bunt on himself obviously made some of these strides on his own. And I think obviously the engagement in the counseling, as your Honor noted, that since basically the inception of probation, he's been engaged in mental health counseling since October 27, 2021 to present. He's been engaged in both individual and group therapies, along with meeting with the agency psychiatrist. And so that's not something that obviously couldn't be done without a lot of work. And so I see Mr. Bunt here today. I see that he's got a sound mind. I think that obviously it was a big accomplishment for him to successfully complete that GED. That's not something I think that prior was as important to him when he was using. And when he was using, obviously now it was not important. He probably couldn't have accomplished it. Back when I really talked to Mr. Bunt a little while ago, he'd given me his grades because he was proud. He had passed, I think it was 3 of the 4 tests. And he's doing well, and he's anticipating passing the last one. You've got to have some confidence and know you're doing well to say, I'm going into the last test, I think I'm going to pass, as opposed to, who knows, let's see what happens. So I know he was very proud of that accomplishment. And not only that, he said, I want to improve my education. He enrolled himself in Mott Community College. So I think he knows the next step is, let's go to college. I know he wants to start on his own and be his own boss someday. And that was one of his biggest fears in turning himself in. If he sat a year in jail, all the setback. And he understands there's going to be consequences for his behaviors or lack thereof regarding the probation. But I would ask the court to consider looking at the fact of who Mr. Bunt is today, as opposed to what this paperwork may have said before we showed up today. Because I think it is 2 completely different people. And I think the letters from the family members who see him on a very consistent basis speaks to that. This is not the same young man that appeared before the court when he pled guilty to these charges back in 2021. I think that Mr. Bunt realizes that going back and using any of these goals that he's come up with himself to go to college and have his own business and be successful, they're not going to be there for him if he goes back to using, he doesn't continue to engage in mental health counseling. I don't think the family probably be that supportive of him. I think if you look at the letter from the father, he looks back and says, I wish we would have been more harsh on him back in the day. So obviously maybe got his attention. Luckily, the court has gotten his attention throughout all of this. And so I think he has matured in the fact that he reached out and said, I want to take care of this. I'm not going to reach my goals. I always look over my shoulder because there's a warrant there and I'm going to get arrested. Unfortunately, this might be a short-term setback for Mr. Bunt, but I don't think it's going to be a long-term setback. I think Mr. Bunt has the tools. I think he's got the support system moving forward and he can be successful. I know that he's got a new significant other. They have an apartment. He's got an ID. Everything seems to be going right for Mr. Bunt, except for this was hanging out there. And I think it took a lot of courage to come in and say, I could face a year knowing these recommendations and still turn yourself in and drive up from Lapeer. He was at a crossroads. So do I take off? Do I blow this off and just hope it never catches up with me? But he made the right choice and he turned himself in. And so for those reasons, Your Honor, I would ask the court to consider staying close, if not going below the recommendations. I think that Ms. Helmrich was completely appropriate in her original recommendation for a year. I think she was also very appropriate when she downsized to 90 days, given all the information that we had submitted, because she got more of the full story of Mr. Bunt over the last 2 years, as opposed to before, where she had absolutely nothing.
That's something that wasn't clear to me, is how Mr. Bunt was recontacted. And can you explain that some more?
I can, Your Honor. I was contacted. I asked the court if we could set it for a Zoom hearing, and I was told he had to turn himself in. And then Mr. Bunt received a notice of Zoom arraignment in the mail. And so he appeared from Lapeer. I was in Benzie County, and we appeared before Magistrate Carter, who was in Antrim County. And at that time, they asked to remand him. And so at that point in time, it was a very emotional situation. Luckily, the court gave him until 7 p.m. the next day. And the family went down, they picked him up and brought him up to turn himself in for this. But he reached out to try to take care of this, as opposed to getting picked up on new charges or being in a car that got pulled over or something like that.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Bunt, I would like to hear from you. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, Your Honor. I do want to take full responsibility, and I understand we would not be here today if I would have just complied with probation. I understand it probably would have saved us all a lot of time and heartache right now. But I do want to say I have matured. I know it doesn't really, there's no record for you guys to see that I've stayed clean, but I have continued to go to NA meetings and NA meetings within CMH. And I am proud of where I've came from today. And part of me feels like I have shown real growth. Granted, I was supposed to comply by probation, but I was able to do all of this stuff, without having the courts breathe down my back. And I know that's something, it's iffy to say, but, I feel proud of where I am today versus where I was in the past. I hate my past, and I know I can't change it. There's a lot of regrets that I have in my past that I hold, I hold grudges towards myself even. And I hope that you'll make the right decision. I have faith that everything will work out, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Ms. Helmrich is here from our probation office. Ms. Helmrich, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yes, Your Honor. I just want to state that I obviously do recognize that he did complete his GED. He is obviously going to counseling and things like that. The problem is that he failed to appear from the very beginning. This has been an abscondtion for almost 20 months now of a 2-year probation term. I understand he's doing well. That's great. But this, due to the long abscondtion and these were some very serious offenses that occurred. I'm still asking for probation to be revoked. I did bring my time my recommendation, jail time down from 1 year to 90 days due to everything he is doing. But I do believe college and counseling and everything will still be there for him when he's released. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so this is sentencing on the defendant's probation violation for essentially absconding on probation. Right from the beginning, really. When the defendant came into the program, he had essentially become, well, he was abusing narcotics. The offense itself, the defendant was throwing up in some bushes. That's how he was contacted by the police, and turned out he had a small baggie of methamphetamine and marijuana, and he was also driving a car that was taken from Hertz Car Rental. I think it was truly a joyriding incident where he wasn't planning on stealing the car, but he hadn't returned it. Defendant admitted he was coming down from methamphetamine. The defendant obviously did not complete any of the conditions of probation, except for he did become, well, he's become committed to meeting his appointments with community mental health. And he does have an established counselor and therapist, a psychologist, and a regular practitioner, according to the letter from his mother, Ms. Blossom. And in addition, he has obtained his GED. He's enrolled in college now. I want to note that the defendant was 22 years old, suffering from both mental health and addiction issues. That is a young age to have to try to figure out life, and so the probation was obviously meant to accomplish therapeutic goals of getting the defendant involved in dual disorders programming. According to his family members, the defendant has made a 180 here. Now that he's involved with community mental health, he doesn't have the same substance issues that he had back when this offense occurred. And it may very well be that that it was just a matter of taking care of those mental health issues that made all the difference. I think it's also important that the defendant in this case turned himself in. If he hadn't done that, this case would just be hanging out there. I'm sure it was an impediment in a number of ways, having an open warrant, and that he knew at some point he would have to deal with that fact. But at the same time, he eventually did turn himself in, and now he's here to face the consequences. So I'm trying to set aside whatever upset or that there is for this court when someone just blows off probation, takes off, and but at the same time, I want to be practical about what is in the best interest of the community as well as Mr. Bunt. And I don't think Mr. Bunt sitting in jail is the best solution here. He's been in jail for 15 days. I think that addresses the absconding. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to extend the probation through from today's date until for 1 year. And during that term of probation, the defendant is to complete all of these conditions of probation. But what I'm going to do before you engage in dual disorders programming or MRT, I'm going to require that you get a new assessment, substance use assessment, and determine whether those classes would be appropriate for you at this point. You're to provide a copy of your most recent psychological evaluation to your probation officer. You are also to follow through with the group classes, the NA and that sort of thing, so long as that's still recommended in a more recent assessment. I am preserving the fines and costs. Ms. Helmrich, is there anything else you'd like me to order?
I just want to make sure that when he's released, he gets a new paperwork appointment. Since we've never been over all this, and I'd really like to compare what he's already doing with what he was ordered. So we're going to need an appointment to get all of this started.
Okay, that would be a Zoom appointment again, correct?
It can be, yes.
All right. So I'll give the defendant credit for the 15, or I think it's actually 16 days now of jail. And is there anything else for you, Mr. Graff?
No, thank you.
All right, we're all set then for this morning. I'm glad to hear that you're doing so well, Mr. Bunt. I want to make sure that we're not just glossing over these substance use issues that got you here in the first place. Okay, so make sure you stay in contact with Ms. Helmrich. I want you to contact her tomorrow. Let's see.
May I add something real quick, Your Honor?
Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a hold on Crawford County, so I won't be able to be released right away. This was from 2019. I got charged for possession of misdemeanor possession of mushrooms. I think I forgot to pay my court costs and fines, so they do have a hold on me. So I will not be able to be released, of course, from Grand Traverse County right away. And I just want to let the courts know that so they don't think I'm missing in action.
Does it make sense for you, Ms. Helmrich, to contact Mr. Bunt at the jail then for the paperwork appointment?
Yeah, we can try and set something over there. The main thing is whenever he's released, if he can just make sure he contacts our probation department right away, then we can start it at any time.
Okay, so you're in a much better place, and I expect that you will make regular contact with Ms. Helmrich to take care of this probation. So we'll go along with that. Mr. Graff, anything else?
No, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Good luck, folks.
Thank you.